My name is Adam Jaffe. I'm the VP of Marketing at Social Point. Social Point is a social game developer based out of Barcelona. Currently have around 210 people, and our games have been downloaded over 300 million times across multiple platforms. I'm here today to talk about buying effective media, and more so a methodology for how each and every one of you can structure your media buying activities to buy the most effective media that you can. I'm going to talk about the five topics you see here, and then the sixth final thoughts, some questions and answers if you guys have anything. So I get asked a lot when I'm talking to gaming companies about what's the best network to buy, what's the right price point, who should I avoid, who should I go to? And for me, these questions always are very loaded. And I'm an opinionated guy. If anybody here knows me, they'll know that I love to talk about all this kind of stuff. But when it comes to these kinds of questions specifically, I always feel that they're the wrong questions. They're starting from the end point. It's the easy thing. And what I'm trying to describe here is a method that says that the spending of the dollar, the actual purchasing of the media, this is the easy part. And in fact, it's the last thing that you should be doing. It's these other, basically, 4 steps that happen before you ever pick out that dollar and or sign that IO that I'm going to be talking about here. So, the first one, know your users. In every company that I've ever spoken with, there's, at least in my opinion, a misconception of what a marketing person actually does in his day-to-day life. They think of us as the people who, well, you see the end product, right? You see the ads inside the game, you see the thing that prevents you from watching your YouTube videos, you can't skip it and it's really frustrating. But there's a reason that you're seeing that video and not your grandmother or your brother or your sister. And it's this step before, which is related specifically here to the BI and the analytics side. So knowing the relationship between the 3 pillars that I mentioned up here, virality, monetization, and retention, understanding how your users maneuver within your application are paramount to building effective media plans. Knowing how much money you can spend, knowing that if you, for instance, have a game with a lot of organic users, well, maybe this allows you to pay a little bit more money. Knowing that specific regions produce better results. These are all factors in allowing you, as I said, to buy effective media. The second part of your analytics is to represent this data for yourself in a daily KPI method. Either, I don't know, for Social Point, where I have a daily email that comes to me, it tells me all of the key factors that happened the night before for all my publishers. And in most companies, when I've talked about this, said, hey guys, you know what you should really have? Show how many new users you brought yesterday, or how much money did you spend yesterday? And people kind of, well, how many new payers? How much money? I mean, most people can tell you how much money they earned yesterday. Maybe cohorted, maybe not. Maybe by geos, most often not. But starting to really internalize this information on a day-to-day basis makes it second nature to you. It makes it so that when you go and have a conversation with that publisher or with that ad network, it's not, oh, let me ask my guys back over there, my BI team, that they can pull this information. It's intuitive. It's already part of the process by which you start the conversation. And for me, it's the most important piece. The second piece is understanding your price points. So a lot of times, I think in today's society, the way that this industry is evolving, I think initially a lot of people would have just talked about the CPI price. I pay $5 for an install because I raised $1 million and I've set aside $200,000 for my budget, and I know that I want to bring in 20,000 installs, and this is what I have. But for me, this is a bit of a misnomer. And I think a lot of people are going to be talking about this. Presentations along the day will be talking about how ROI and how much you can actually spend for an install is more important than the actual price that you're paying. In the sense that when you look at this number, whether it's $1 or $10, being able to effectively understand how you came to that number, it's more important. So, talking about the ECPI, I don't know, I think there's several people who use this term differently. We talk about it as the effective cost per install, or the number at which you can break even. The way that we derive this number is we take a cohorted user group. So for instance, 2 months ago, 5,000 people installed on the second day of the month. And we now track these users over the 2-month period, and we say these 2,000 users made $2,000. Therefore, my eCPI is $1. So to buy at a profitable campaign, I could have spent $1. Basically understanding this number across countries, geos, your games, will allow you to, again, build more effective media plans. The second piece about understanding your price point is understanding the relationship between your installs and your organic traffic. Ultimately, what you're trying to do is be able to spend, the right amount of money to bring in the right kinds of users. So if you know, for instance, that marketing represents 30% of your total overall install, and consistently, no matter how much more you bring, let's say that you increase from 5,000 installs a day to 50,000 installs, that ratio remains consistent, then you know that when you're setting your eCPIs, or rather you're setting your CPI price, you can factor that multiplier in order to achieve higher numbers of, you can achieve a higher CPI and ultimately more downloads. Because as we all know, it's difficult to scale without increasing your CPI. So for instance, if you're paying $2 and you go to a network, I want more traffic, apart from really hardcore optimization, the easiest factor is simply increasing your price point. And so being able to understand how these other factors relate to that, you can justify spending additional capital. So now this presentation is going to be pretty quick. It's only 6 slides. So anyway, so you've done your homework. So now you know all about your users. You know where they come from. You know who they are. You know how they function within your game. You know that if a user reaches a certain level, they're X% more likely to make a purchase. You have your framework. You understand how much you need to pay and where you need to pay. At this point, you're creating the plan. And for me, a plan, and I know a lot of times, even myself included, when I first started building plans for marketing, and I'm thinking mobile marketing, things change so quickly. It's like every week, a new company comes up, or this, King decides they want to blow the market up and spend 10x what everyone else is spending, or there's the World Cup, or there's always something. So how can I really plot how much money I'm going to be able to spend, or how much money is going to be able to be driven in from my application? But having an effective plan based on this information that you've gathered previously gives you a framework from which to operate. It gives you the ability to think critically and objectively about your media spends. So in SocialPoint, whenever we're launching a new game or going into a new market, the first thing we do is we create this very specific and very, very detailed plan. We're looking at ARPDAUs. We're looking at retention rates. We're looking at monetization, ARPUs, everything combined into something we want to get to. So for instance, in a new market, we just launched Monster Legends, which is one of our titles, in Android. And our goal was to be #1 in the US App Store. So we built this very, very aggressive plan, which basically focused exclusively on growth and had nothing to do with monetization. So we were looking to buy very cheap installs, but the plan itself was developed based on this particular mindset. In other games, we have Dragon City, which is a bit older. We're focusing more on monetization. So the plan looks much different. Ultimately structured the same, but the focus and the goal is different. And knowing the difference between the stages of your applications and what you're looking to achieve can better help you structure your plans. So, what should you have in your plans? Generally speaking, some kind of install goal. I would like to achieve 5,000 installs from day one, moving it up to 6,000, 8,000, blah, blah, blah. Secondly, as I inject more users, how will my ARPDAU be affected? So in day one, it's a new application, so mostly paid traffic. You're not getting a lot of organics. Maybe you're using a little bit more incentivized traffic than you'd like, so your ARPU is going to be a bit lower. But over time, as more organic traffic starts to seep in, your ARPU should climb, and ultimately you're going to be making more money. So projecting that over time and watching the relationship between how much money you spend in marketing as compared to the total revenue of the application, it's an important metric, especially given the way media is typically bought in mobile. Excuse me. What I mean by that is, oftentimes your media that you buy is not just you're not just buying on a per cost basis. Sorry, you're not just buying for profitability, because most applications, unless you're in the top 10 grossing or top 15 grossing, you're not going to buy for profitability. You're buying for something else. Maybe profitability for you is 50% ROI. Meaning you're going to return 50%, in which case you know that the organics on top of this traffic will bring in the additional 50% that you would need. So understanding this ratio of marketing to net revenue gives you a framework. As I'm spending my $1,000 every month, or every day, sorry, am I increasing or decreasing? Am I buying the right traffic as a whole? Is my overall revenue that's being generated in the application growing or decreasing. And this is an important metric to keep in mind as you look to scale. And the final piece of the plan, it relates to tracking your results. And even if you're way off by huge stretches, having that in writing and saying, hey, look, we did a really good job. We were actually, well, we're way off, but at least we learned something. We learned that when you try and burst in Android and you reach the top chart, you don't get 150% of organics like you thought. We only got 16%. True story. So all the numbers that we had, yeah, they're wrong. But at least we knew that now for the next version, we're going to update this and make it a little bit more specific, a little bit more accurate. So having this plan gives you a very nice framework from which to operate for, well, for the current and obviously for the future. Okay, so now you've created the plan. Now, so you know all the users, you've got your price points, you've got your plan, you know you need to bring in 5,000 installs a day from the United States, female. And I put this slide up here courtesy of Interactive. I think it's a really good representation of just how convoluted and, well, the space that we operate in. I mean, there's an untold number of publishers, both small and large, to buy media from. You can go to Facebook, there's Twitter, there's Google, and you only got a small budget. You say, I only have $100,000 a month to spend. Where do I go? And at this point, you have all the tools to answer that question. And in fact, because you've done the research and because you have a very clearly defined plan, this list, it becomes a lot smaller and it becomes a lot more specific. Because you know, for instance, well, I know I must have only female. Okay, well then you know that basically Facebook's the only one that can track that. Twitter to some degree as well. Or I want only this particular kind of traffic. Okay, so then you know more or less if these networks have that. It makes weeding out bad performing networks or networks that would most likely not perform for you much easier. So finding the right source is not always about being the most popular. It's not always going to the place where if I've said, oh, you have to go to Facebook. A good example for me is Google doesn't work for my games, ever. We've never been able to make it work. But for me, Facebook works really well. And I've found companies which is the complete opposite. Scalability on Facebook, for them, it's basically non-existent. But Google is like their haven. And our games are very similar. And I'm like, I don't understand how that is. Is it just because I'm not a very good media buyer? Maybe. But generally speaking, I think it's more indicative of how my game is structured. And knowing this beforehand, well, it could have saved me a lot of money. A lot of money. Okay. So you've done everything that you can do. You've gotten to the point where you found the right publisher. You know all the things you can know about your users. You've defined the right path. You've got the right publisher, and you've signed the IO. And now, only 2 or 3 weeks later, you start buying media. And this is like I said, it's the easy part. Spending the money should be basically the last step of this process. And now comes the actual interesting bits, which is the optimization. And for me, I think that, and this was told to me this morning by Sigal from Tabzica as a requote, which is that there's no such thing as wrong media. There's only the wrong price. And in the test and optimization phase, this is where you can really start to extrapolate more information about how this particular network is working for you. So now you know it's female, you know that it's the US, you know how many installs you're getting, and you're getting all of these things, but for some reason, it's not happening for you. You're still not getting the ROI, you're still not attracting the right kind of users. And in this point, this is where the optimization process becomes key, because there really isn't any more that you can do in terms of understanding about your users. So I put this little graphic up here to illustrate, for me, what we've found in Social Point is the key driver of users is the creative. And optimizing the creative, it's the most important piece of the test and optimizing phase. So you can see that this is Pandolf. He's part of Monster Legends. He's the main character. And the first iteration looks a bit more like Mickey Mouse, to be honest with you, from Fantasia. And we found that he didn't work very well. He wasn't appealing. People didn't really like him. So we said, okay, we're going to reiterate. So we made him purple. And then we found out, actually, we don't have any women playing our games. It's only men. So purple for them, although it's a cool color and I like wearing purple sometimes. It doesn't appeal to this audience that we're trying to attract. So we iterated a third time, and we created Pandoff in his current form. And you can see that he's, well, he's a happy dude. Thumbs up. And this particular image of Pandoff, it was the best for us. It produced the best results. I know, sorry for you guys in the back column. It is what it is. So this flow of launch, review, and optimize, it's basically the role of your account managers. I mean, in the end of the day, these people, they live and breathe this life cycle stage of how do I effectively bring in more traffic over time without having to go out and test 60 networks or 80 networks. I know now I've already got my crystallized view of who I need to work with. This is the next thing. So there are a few caveats to this, and I mentioned them down here at the below, which is that the creative optimization process it's a double-edged sword. It can bring very, very positive results, but if you guys make a mistake and you create images which are very disjunct from your application, for instance, we were running a creative that looked like Sonic the Hedgehog, and we got amazing click-through rates. I mean, we're talking like Facebook was saying like, we don't know what you guys are doing, but well done. Except our CTR was like, our conversion rate was like 0.2%. So we were paying like $60 an install. I'm like, it's probably not working so well. And the reason was that people were saying, wow, Sonic, I didn't know they made a mobile game. Click, they get to the page, oh, it's not Sonic, it's something else that I didn't even know. So, like I said, it's a double-edged sword. So you know that it can create very high and relevant content for you, high engaging and relevant content, but it also can work against you in terms of lowering CPI prices. So finding that balance is key. Obviously, you make sure that your store page is relevant to the text and images that you're creating for your applications and that you're marketing. And building a new creative through a methodological, via method. I can't talk today. Living abroad too long and my English is going. Building a methodological manner. Yeah, there you go. Will ensure success. So for instance, for us at Social Point, we've got a very good way which we create creative. So we have a meeting every Monday morning. We bring in the artists. They've prepared ideas and concepts for this week. We also review through the media and publisher teams the results of last week's creatives, and we iterate. And it's been going on for the last year. And today, I can tell you that in our games, we have very good creatives. And we know that because we have all the historical data. It's all in a nice Google Doc. We have what should be created in the future, and it's just a machine cranking out new creatives every, I don't know, we're doing at least 5 to 7 new creatives every week per game. And this is what helps us become successful. And that's it. So again, just as a recap, know who your users are. Start with the knowledge that you need to better understand who plays your games and why. And within that application, when they enter into your application, what do you want them to do? Is it that they need to reach a certain level? Or what happens when they reach that level? Basically, understanding all this knowledge is going to help you become a better marketer. Understand your price points. How much can you really pay? If I told you that you could pay $60 for an install, most people here would shudder and say, I don't think my CEO would approve that kind of price point. But if you said, actually, based on the organic traffic that we get in this region and the general average revenue per paying user, it's actually justifiable that I could even spend $80 to bring this person in. Why not? I'm making $20 for every purchase, for every install. So creating that, important. Third, create a plan. Give yourself a framework from which to base all of your future results off of, and make sure that you are following in that line because it's going to help you a lot. Even if you're totally off, yeah? You can always readjust the plan. These aren't set in stone, but they're going to give you a framework from which to operate. Fourth, with this knowledge, you find the right publisher and you close the right deals. And fifth, you optimize. And you keep optimizing until you get promoted, and then somebody else does it below you. And that's it. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions? Anyone?
Hi, thanks. It was actually a very good talk. You had a point in it where you said figure out how many organics you're going to get per paid install. Can you explain how you do that in your case?
Sure. So, in general, the only way to really truly track what we're calling virality on Facebook on mobile, it's through the Facebook SDK. Most companies, unless you have a very sophisticated tracking mechanism which knows that when you push a gift out that it's being received by a certain person, mostly we're talking about through the Facebook SDK, they have this capacity to tell you. This is a little bit less sophisticated, what I'm talking about. You should know the general ratio between how many paid installs you bring versus the application in general, how much organic traffic it brings in without you having to touch anything. And a good way to start looking at that is markets which you don't necessarily market in initially. So if you've launched your game and you have, say, 5,000 active users in one particular country, and you're like, I don't know, they're just there, they arrive because they like the game. And then you start marketing, you start making that push, you add 1,000 users, does the game grow? And then you can start to understand the relationship between paid versus organic. Does that make sense?
So take a market where you're not having to do any paid install.
Yeah, I mean, well, generally speaking, you should have a ratio regardless. I mean, even if you've already been marketing for a long time in a region, you should have a very clear line. I brought 50,000 installs yesterday. 10,000 were paid, 40,000 were organic. They just came from the air. And now I know that my ratio is more or less 4-to-1. And from this way, because in the end of the day, you're not a silo, right? The marketing department doesn't sit in this corner. Well, sometimes it does, but generally speaking, you're not in this like basement, right? You market for the entire application. And oftentimes when you're looking to build out a marketing plan, if you look in that view, you can't spend any money because most companies are not profitable from the marketing that they're doing exclusively. You have to look at it as a total application. So doing it in this way, it's not as scientific as maybe you'd like, but it gives you a better understanding of how to effectively buy, how much money you can spend.
And sort of developing on that idea, do you find the ratio remains the same when you hit the top 10 overall, like the thing?
Yeah, I mean, it does and it doesn't. I know that I don't have much time, but generally speaking, the ranking of your application, it depends a lot on country, which country you're in. So for instance, in Asia, in Japan specifically, being top 1 is amazing. It gives you tons of downloads. The US, not so much. I mean, we've ranked in basically every country. We've done a lot of these burst campaigns, and I can tell you that it's not as effective of a way to bring traffic as you might think.
Hi, great talk. When a creative works for you, what's the longest amount of time you can run it on, both a mobile and Facebook network?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we have this creative, it's an image of Pokemon. Well, it's our game looking like Pokemon. It does really well. It's worked for us forever. And we're constantly trying to find images that aren't Pokemon because obviously we don't want to continue using somebody else's style. But I'd say that given a normal application and a normal creative, anywhere between 3 to 5 days is the right time period. So that's why you have to continually create and iterate on these creatives because they go very quickly.
So is that all in-house, or do you have a creative agency that handles it?
Yeah, everything is done in-house, and it helps too because my artists sit in the marketing department. They're part of my team, and they're constant. And I train them as well as I trained my account managers to be interested in the numbers because a truly good artist should also care about the results of his stuff. So they're interested in CTR, they're interested in ROI. And pushing them, I know that most artists are a little bit more about colors and things and the relationship and aspect ratio and all that kind of stuff, but getting them focused on that, and typically an outsourcing agency will have no interest in that whatsoever. And you probably don't want to share that information with them anyway.
Great, thank you very much. That's all we have time for today. Thanks.